Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second ever Lightning Talk series on data-driven management, sponsored by
Woohoo!
Scratchpad. Woohoo! Scratchpad is the
Woohoo!
easiest way to update and manage your pipeline in Salesforce like never before. You can get started for free in 30 seconds, and I just popped their website in the chat. If you haven't been to one of these lightning talks before, this format is a bit different than our usual digital events. We pulled together the best data-driven minds in the biz, and they're going to talk about everything from developing a data-driven mindset to the right metrics for growth and alignment. Usually we'll spend about 20 minutes with each of our data-driven leaders in each episode, and we'll do a lightning fast talk on one of those topics. And today we're going to be talking about developing a data-driven mindset and ensuring data-driven leadership. This event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros, and our mission is to help our community members answer questions they might struggle to answer on their own. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're at today, through a robust online forum, and hopefully in the future, post-pandemic, in-person events. And if you like this content, you're really going to love our Revenue Excellence Summit that's happening so soon, October 12th through 14th. We're going to talk about the people, the process, and the technology to help you get ready for 2022. You can register for that in the chat. So back to today. The king of data-driven management, founder and CEO of Atrium and Modern Sales Pros, Pete Kazanjy is here, and he's going to talk to us about developing a data-driven mindset and ensuring data-driven leadership. Pete, can you give us a little introduction, and then we'll dive in?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Taylor. I appreciate it. It's kind of meta to be the subject matter expert as opposed to the moderator, but like I guess I do think about this stuff just a little bit. My name's Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps AE, SDR, and AM, CSM managers use data to improve team performance. So I think about this stuff a little bit. I'm also the founder of Modern Sales Pros, author of Founding Sales book, the Startup Sales Handbook. So, but yeah, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm pumped to chat about it a little bit and get interrogated by you, Taylor. You're gonna be gentle, right?
I'll be gentle.
Okay, great.
So this is what we're going to talk about today. These are the 3 questions we'll run through. We're going to talk about building a foundation for developing a data-driven mindset, how to incorporate that into your leadership, and then building a culture based on all of that. So we want to make sure your teams are data-driven as well. We love our events to be super engaging, to be interactive. So please do pop your questions, your commentary, jokes if you have any, into the Q&A and chat panel. And if you want to invite your friends or your colleagues or your parents, you can drop them that link that I just put in the Zoom. Let me put the slides here. Pete, let's get started. Data-driven, as we know, is at the heart of everything that you do. But let's just go back to the basics. How do you even start, and how do you build that foundation for a data-driven mindset?
Yeah, I think the thing that is really important is for folks to realize that they can just start. You can just start. Because oftentimes there's like a whole vendor class or kind of like expert class in the market who have like a huge financial incentive to be like, booga, 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 this is really hard to do, listen to me because I'm an expert, or like buy my software, etc. And I think one of the things that folks don't realize is that, like, it's more of a process, and you can just kind of start, right? Like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So I think that's the first thing, is just to set an intention to say like, hey, look, I'm going to be better at this, right? And so then the next thing would be like, okay, well then what does that starting look like, right? If you're running an SDR team, that could say, hey, we're going to start counting, a single metric. Maybe if we're not paying attention to it very deeply, like it could just be aggregate activities. Oh, we're already doing that. Oh, okay, well let's do an additional one, right? Let's pay attention not just to aggregate number of activities. Let's pay attention to, total number of accounts interacted with, right? Let's break that out on a per rep basis. So it's kind of like, 1, you can just start, and then 2, always just like add the next thing. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing that I'm going to do to be better? So that's the first thing on kind of developing a data-driven mindset. And then the second thing, so it's like, just start, right? It's kind of like, I guess it's like going to the gym. Just start. Just show up there. I think the second thing though is that once you start, it's not something that you do once, right? It's a habit. And so what you want to do is you want to weave your, data centricity into your operating rhythm. And so if you have ideally you have an operating rhythm in your organization that is composed of like, a set of different meetings, right? Like it might be a Monday morning team meeting. It might be pipeline review, like half-hour pipeline reviews, individually with your reps. Weekly, it might be a half-hour one-on-ones, maybe bi-weekly that isn't focused on pipeline review with your reps or what have you. But like you have this operating rhythm, or you should, and then kind of like weaving data-driven behavior into that operating rhythm will just make it such that you're now habituating to it. So just start is the first thing. And then the second thing is, again, I guess maybe gym is the right metaphor. Just start going to the gym and then just make sure that you're going every day, or you're going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or you're going Tuesdays and Thursday. Like a good example of this is like, you could start, I'll use an example from my team, starting to commit to good data hygiene in order to make sure that you can then report well, means that when you're doing pipe reviews, like as an example, we do pipe reviews at Atrium using Atrium, but we also use Scratchpad as a mechanism for reps to take notes and also update fields and what have you. And so we just have this mindset of like, oh, that close date's wrong, fix it. Right? Oh, that amount is off, fix it. Right? Oh, that stage is wrong, fix it. Right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to do it later. It's just, in this case, they use Scratchpad and they just like go Command J and they just like beep, 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 beep. Right? But the point being that like, it's like, we know that it's not okay to have like wrong close dates and amounts off and what have you, and we just fix it right there. And then what ends up happening is that starts kind of like getting in the water. So then we have like a team pipe review, and then someone will, as they're going through the pipe, and they're like, oh, actually, that just slipped. So, and they'll say, I already have it open in another tab, I'm going to update it before anybody asks. Right? So now what you've got is like, you've got it acculturated, and people are, it's in the water at that point. But that doesn't just happen like instantaneously. That's a process, right? And now you've got a snowball rolling downhill. So that's like, in summary, what I would say is like, just start, and then think about ways of like weaving it in and habituating it throughout your operating rhythm.
That's awesome. And then what about you were saying you have folks fix it right away. How do you develop those resources so they know exactly where to go? Like, how do you create that habit of making sure they're filling in the right thing immediately?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you got to make it like easy AF for them, because AEs and SDRs are super busy, and also just like the world is distracting, and so you got to make it super easy. And so you as a leader, as a manager, as an operations person, need to look for areas of like optimization as much as possible there. So like a good example of this is I'm a big user of like Guru, right?
Okay.
And so anytime there's a question, we put a question and an answer in Guru, and that's my responsibility, right? And my reps will tell me that, and they'll be like, hey, I need an objection handle for XYZ, and I'll be like, all right, cool, I'll Guru that, right? And then I will close the loop back, and then they know that they go to Guru in order to answer that question. Similarly, I don't want my reps to have to like look around for meeting templates or meeting templates for for the meetings that they're having, or kind of like checklists or whatever. Originally what we had was like, we had a Google document that was like the types of Atrium sales meetings, and it was like, there's 8 different types of meeting. There's like an initial disco, and there's like a disco plus a demo, and then there's like a senior stakeholder business case presentation and what have you. So we had that originally, was easily hyperlinked to, and then the second, but now actually all that's decomposed into Scratchpad templates, helpfully enough, and then like I own those up here at the template level or what have you, and that way nobody has to like worry about it. They just like open their thing, and it's like right there, and they click like new meeting, and it's like right there, and then it's got all their checklists and what have you. But the point is like, what you're trying to do is like remove friction as much as as much as possible. And then same with like the data-driven component of things, right? Is like don't make it hard to find that dashboard or that table or that view or whatever. And the way that you do that is just like lots of hype. It like stacks on each other. You've got your team meeting agenda, right? And like you've got a template of that. And what we do is we just like clone them off like this, like, oh, okay, what day's today? The 7th, September 7th. You're like, copy paste, right? And then that template has like hyperlinks off to like, oh, this is the round robin dashboard where like we go and we look at that. Oh, this is the, the SDR outcomes dashboard from last week. And then that way, like no time is spent having to like go find stuff. It's just like right there. Yeah. Right. So I think that like as a leader or as an operations person, what you're trying to do is you're trying to like systematize that and then like remove cruft and remove overhead as much as possible. And that way people can spend their time just acting as opposed to like trying to find things.
Love that. And I am a severe color calendar coordinator, so that is
love it.
Well,
me too. Customer facing meetings are green. Internal meetings are baby blue for me.
I love that. I got yellow and dark blue, so we're close. Well, let's talk more about how you incorporate more of that leadership. So you talked about a little bit about responsibility, like, okay, it's your responsibility to update that guru card. It's your responsibility to make things easier for your team to find. How else are you incorporating that data that you're starting from the basics into leadership?
Yeah, and I think that's related to the first one. Is like it's just it just shows up everywhere in that operating rhythm. So I'll give kind of like one example of this. We kind of talked about pipeline reviews earlier, so now I'll talk about coaching one-on-ones, which are different, right? Pipeline review is, hey, let's go through your pipeline review / deal strategy is, let's look at, we've got 3 deals or 5 deals that need attention right now, and let's strategize on it and discuss that. And then pipeline review is kind of like, okay, cool, let's just like inspect these things and make sure that everything is like spick and span, the close dates are right, the amounts are right, or what have you. Well, that's actually that's different than coaching, right? Like a one-on-one should be, that's like pipe review. A one-on-one should be for career development. It should be for not pipe management. It should be for coaching, et cetera. And so what we do there, as related to the data-driven kind of like mindset, is every single rep of like, I have a dashboard. It's actually an Atrium dashboard that is it's a coaching dashboard. It literally says like, it would say like, Bob Williams coaching dashboard, right? And it's like for me and that rep. And so because each rep, we have a different topic that we're working on from a coaching standpoint. Like this rep right here may not be doing enough prospecting. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put metrics around that, and we're going to say, hey, you're supposed to be doing this amount of prospecting. We're going to create a tile on opportunity creation that is in your name, right? Not stuff that you got from SDRs. We're going to look at precursors like total number of accounts touched and email volume, and like that might be enough, right? Like that, and that's the thing we're working on with that rep right there. And then this rep over here, we might be looking at things like closing stuff or what have you. So that might be like conversion rates out of pilot. It might be win rate from pilot. It might be total number of opportunities that are getting into pilot and getting out of pilot as well. And that might just be like 4 tiles in the dashboard. So like each rep has a different problem. It's kind of like coaching golf or basketball or whatever. It's like, you've got this problem, you've got this problem, you've got this problem. We're going to work on each of those. And then those coaching dashboards are embedded in our operating rhythm. So when we meet, we know that that's what we're going to look at. And then the other thing too is I'm a big fan of having data meet you where you are, right? So come into your inbox, come into Slack. And so all those dashboards broadcast. They broadcast to me and the rep via Slack. It's just like on a 2-person DM thread. The software just kicks it out. And the same is true on email. Just emails me and emails the rep with that information. That way, like, I'm in an Uber and I can just be like this, right? I'm clearing my inbox and I'm like, oh, they're improving there, and I can forward it to them and be like, high five, that's awesome. Or forward it to them and be like, oh, it doesn't look like this is improving. Let's make sure that we focus in on this on one-on-one. And then when it's done, like when that problem has been solved, great, we move on to the next one. right? Like, all right, you're awesome on the like, fadeaway jumper. Great. Now let's work on your assists or whatever. And like those old tiles, like that previous topic, they get pushed down and new ones show up at the top, right? I'm a little bit of like a hoarder in that regard. So I feel bad about deleting the old ones. So I just kind of push them down. But I know that like these are the ones that are the important one. So like that's how what you make sure that you're integrating that data driven management into your operating rhythm in a way that's different than just like pipeline review.
I see. That's amazing because everyone knows what they need to be doing individually and as a team, and
Yeah.
it's constantly in your face. There's no escaping the data. Like it's just what you need to be doing at all times. And I think that goes into
Yeah.
our third point, which was how you create that culture. And you've touched on that a lot here. But what do
Yep.
you do, like you said, when something is completed? How do you celebrate that? How do you acknowledge that and then move on to the next thing?
Well, it is important to acknowledge it and celebrate it because yeah, it's like carrot sticks and celebration and what have you, right? So like let's extend the example that we were talking about previously. Um, what you're doing, like you, as you kind of noted, you can't escape it. And so what you're doing is you're consuming this information and then you're using that to be able to make judgments about it and say, oh, this is great. This problem has been solved, right? I'm going to celebrate that. I'm going to celebrate that to this person. I'm also going to celebrate that to the whole team. Why? It's not sufficient just to celebrate to the individual. I have to celebrate to the whole team. Why? Because we have to show that on this team, not only is it important, we are held accountable to making the successes or like making the improvements that have been identified, but we also celebrate that as well. So it's not like, oh, like we say that we do this, but we don't necessarily do it. It's like, yeah, on this team, we do that. And so an important way to do that is to celebrate that. And on the flip side, if somebody's not getting there, there's kind of like different schools of thought around, praise in public, correct in private. I think the more kind of the more kind of like pointed correction and kind of coaching and kind of constructive feedback, constructive criticism and feedback ought to be done privately, and it needs a space, hence the operating rhythm of the one-on-ones, right? Like if you don't have that there, it ain't never going to happen, right? And it has to be different, right? Like one of the things that we talk about on our team is we have this concept of calendar is destiny. And so what you do is, you got to make space on the calendar, which is why pipe review is different than one-on-one, right? Because one-on-one is for like, therapy and coaching and what have you, and pipe review is for inspecting deals. So you have to have that space for that constructive criticism, for that, for that correction. But I think also what ends up happening is like the team would also like to know if somebody isn't really towing the line and putting their shoulder into it, they want to know that correction is happening. And so there's ways that you can kind of permeate that to the team as well. And I think that that's another really powerful thing of like infusing data into the organization. Like you can have leaderboards, right? Where it's like, hey, look, here's how many self-sourced AE opportunities everybody on the AE team opened last month, right? And that could be like a 2-tile, and then how much prospecting activity happened. That could be like a 2-tile dashboard that broadcast, and then how much is happening this month so far. And that could be like a 4-tile dashboard that like broadcasts out on Mondays, right? And that doesn't mean you have to reply to it and like call out the person at the bottom of the stack and be like, what are you doing, man? But what everybody kind of knows is like, okay, cool. Like I'm up here, I'm at the top, or I'm in the middle, I'm in the mix, right? And I'm working, and I'm getting recognized for that. And folks who need to be held accountable are being held accountable. And that makes those folks feel better, because nobody likes being on a team where like perceived underperformance isn't being coached or corrected, because then they're like, well, why am I like busting my ass, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I approach that.
Great. I did want to touch on this question, which I think is great, that came with the registration. And I think
Sweet.
it's a big problem. So someone said there's always more data, always more metrics to potentially measure. How do you keep people reined in and focused? How do you keep yourself focused, your stakeholders, your team on the right data that you should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that question is like one, I think oftentimes when people say there's like too many metrics to pay attention to, usually what that's an indicator of is like an insufficiently built out operating rhythm. Because it turns out that like and there's a master class that I do on MSP like once a quarter called like setting and managing with goals, or I think the sexy name is like setting goals that don't suck. And there's kind of like, when you look at dashboards and reports, the question is like, when is this consumed, right? On, like as an example, if you have reps that are ramping, understanding how they're ramping and how their opportunity inflow is working and how their pipeline inflow is building, and that their opportunity advancements are coming into band, that's important. You could say like, well, is that important as like, win rate for the existing team, like revenue formula metrics like bookings and wins and win rate and ASP and deal cycle for the existing team? And the response to that is like, I'm sorry, you have to like pat your belly and rub your head, right? In this case, like you have to do both. Oftentimes what ends up happening is people don't provide structure in their operating rhythm. And so they're just like, oh, well, there's like all of these metrics and like I have this giant wall of charts. What am I supposed to do? And the answer to that is like atomize it. Oh, on Sundays at 5 p.m., our ramping dashboard and ramping alerts send out, and we look at them for 15 minutes. And on Monday morning, the team meeting, that's when I look at my team meeting dashboard, right? And have goals, goal results that come out of that. And on Wednesdays, or maybe like on Tuesday mornings and on Thursday mornings, that's where like the week-based activity metrics come out. These are all very different things, right? But because they're woven into an operating rhythm, it's not like, what should I look at right now? It's like, no. On Thursday morning, for your SDR team, you need to look at if we're doing enough prospecting activity for this week and if opportunity creation is sufficiently there for this week, or else we're going to be hosed come Monday, right? Like on Thursday, we still have enough time to make corrections there, right? It's kind of like an and thing, but it can't be all at once. It needs to be split out throughout like an operating rhythm on the week, on the month, etc.
Nice. You're making it easy.
Yeah, easy on yourself. Make it easy on yourself. Yeah, totally. That's a good way of putting it.
Awesome. And then Peter asked this question: should the SDR only forward qualified opportunities to a sales team? Should the SDR do some qualifications, but let the sales rep determine the discovery call if a company is a qualified opportunity? Very specific.
Yeah, for sure. I think the answer to that question, to kind of like give it a little bit of a data bent, is kind of contingent on the information and the data you're able to capture about that opportunity. If for whatever if in your sales motion, like I'll use Atrium as an example, we know that Atrium works really great for organizations that use that have between 5 and 400 sales reps. And that's actually very easily identifiable from LinkedIn externally, right? Like you don't have to talk to somebody in order to figure that out. You just like go on LinkedIn and kind of, or go on Zoom Info or what have you, and like kind of look up that information. If for whatever reason, like that information is not available or not observable, then that becomes a different question, right? Like in those sort of situations, maybe it makes sense for the SDR to have a little bit of like qualification there to like talk. When you think about like BANT, budget, authority, need, and timeline, usually the best thing to do for an SDR is to qualify on need, right? You can either say, hey, in order for something to be a qualified opportunity, we're going to get 1 of BANT, or maybe if you're more aggressive, 2 of BANT. Does this person have a sufficient title? Is there need in the organization? And that can be helpful from a leverage standpoint, because that way AEs are getting onto conversations where, to use Atrium as an example again, we work with organizations that have, like I was saying, between 5 and 400 SDRs plus AEs, but we actually have we only work with Salesforce as a CRM, like we don't work with like Pipedrive or HubSpot or what have you. So if you can avoid having AEs hop onto a call and like block a half hour on their calendar and to like have a conversation with somebody, and one of their first disco questions is, oh, hey, by the way, just wanted to verify, you guys use Salesforce as your CRM, and that person's like, no, we use HubSpot and blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to give you back time in your day, et cetera, et cetera. But like that's like a half hour that's been, it's not wasted because like the AE can go and do like email or whatever, but like their 15 minutes of pre-call planning is wasted. Their 10 minutes of like, rapport building and kind of initial chit chat is wasted as well. So those are the sort of things that you can do, that you can have an SDR do to make sure that AEs are coming into a call fully aligned, right?
Great. Thank you, Peter. Peter and Pete just made that connection. Before, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I think this question is kind of fun if you want to answer this, Pete. What is the most unlikely but helpful data set you've used?
Oh, wow. Unlikely but helpful data set I've used. Early on, it was crazy when we were doing it like early research and kind of early product development at Atrium. This is like 2017, 2018. One of the things, like everybody knows that like customer facing meetings is a really important thing for account executives. But one of the things that we kind of figured out was that the number of like second meetings and third meetings for a given account, and then the ratio between the number of first meetings an AE is having versus the number of second meetings and third meetings and fourth meetings ends up like being really predictive of their performance, interestingly enough. And I think it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because it's kind of like opportunity conversion rates. Like, are you getting opportunities down the pipe? Like if you're getting a lot of second dates, if you're getting a lot of third dates, that's usually a pretty good indicator. But up until a certain point, like you can have like a really aggressive, like super high follow-up meeting ratio where like, let's say you're having 5 second plus meetings for every initial meeting. That can either mean you're not having any initial meetings, which can mean like your new opportunity inflow has like fallen off a cliff, which is not good. It could also mean that you're just having like a bunch of second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth meetings with a given opportunity without it closing, right? Which can be problematic in its own right, because ultimately we like AEs are not here to have meetings. AEs are here to close business. Now they have meetings in order to close business, but the meetings are not the goal, right? And so this was just something that like we realized that you could extract just like a ton of signal out of this like one very little thing, and it's crazy to kind of see it in practice, right? Like you get these patterns where you get these reps who have a hard time closing, and they have these really high follow-up meeting ratios because they just kind of get kicked all around the org and like kind of chase their tails, as opposed to like closing. And then you have reps who have really low follow-up meeting ratios where they're not able to get to second calls or not able to get to third calls because they're kind of muffing the initial like discovery call or whatever. And all of these are fixable, but first you got to understand like what problem they got, right? Like, is it a problem in golf? Is it a problem with them keeping their head down? Or are they not keeping their arms straight, or like whatever? But like, you got to diagnose what the problem is first, because then what you can do is add it to that coaching dashboard and like start working on it, right? And like start doing some of the mock behavioral stuff and what have you. So yeah, that was kind of like the first data, or like that's like a really interesting data set. I guess it's not a different data set. It's a data set with that like when cut a different way or massaged a different way gives really interesting insight from for a data-driven management standpoint.
That's awesome. Never would have thought of that. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen again so we can wrap things up. Thank you to everyone who attended today. We loved having you here. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Scratchpad. They're doing awesome things, so please check them out. And Pete, this was amazing. Thank you so much for providing insight, giving us the time. The recording and the key takeaways for all of this will be posted later today. And don't forget to check out our upcoming events. If you loved this, if you got the foundations down, you got the basics down, we will see you next week, the 14th, same time, and we'll be talking about the most important qualities in a data-driven manager. So thank you again. Thank you, Pete.
You bet. See you, Taylor.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.